Yeah, so Arithmetic is Assistant Professor of English and is headquarters in online education at Indira Bharati University. And this paper is entitled "Who Only Covers Dynamic Debts, Analyzing the Possibilities of Multiple Debts in the Marble Cinematic Universe."
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. Okay, so my paper is titled "Do Only Cowards Die Multiple Deaths? Analyzing the Possibilities of Multiple Deaths in the Marvel Cinematic Universe." I will straight away begin. জন্মিলে মরিতে হবে অমরকে কোথা কবে, চিরস্থির কবে নীর হায়রে জীবন রবে. In these lines, poet Jivanananda Das had not explicitly mentioned the possibility of a single death, but of death in general. However, following common understanding, it could be easily argued that the mortal only dies once in a single birth. Even when one takes the concept of rebirth into consideration, it brings the anecdote of multiple deaths along with it. Therefore, in almost all religions and regions of the world, dying twice or more in the same birth is almost impossible. There are exceptions like Jesus' resurrection, Lakshman's coming back to life in the Battle of Lanka, and so on, but all these events require tantamount efforts. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the audience experiences partial genocide at the end of Avengers Infinity War, which is reversed by the end of Avengers Endgame. The estimated population of the Earth in 2019, according to Waldo Peters, is 7.7 billion people. According to Thanos, when he is done, half of humanity will still be alive. Therefore, about 3.85 billion people were blipped away and brought back to life. Even if one can accept such a transgression for the superheroes whose lives are run by a set of rules unbeknownst to the mundane, but for common people whose fear of death leads insurance companies to have billions of dollars in revenue every quarter, this incident is no joke. There was a gap of 5 years between the death of these people and their subsequent revival in their next film. In these 5 years, the ones who had lost their dear ones were just starting to get used to their absence. A memorial was erected in San Francisco called the Wall of the Vanished, this one, to indicate the fact that the death of these people was not a normal death. Taking into consideration the fact that this is a universe built on fantasy, one must extend Coleridge's willing suspension of disbelief by another notch. However, death was a significant marker in the MCU, and it was mentioned multiple times in the first two phases that it was the ultimate sacrifice anyone could make. For instance, Phil Coulson at the end of the first Avengers movie died to ensure that the 6 original Avengers got together as a team and defeated Loki, who was wreaking havoc upon New York City. This instant of death, however, is rendered complicated if one takes into account the extended Marvel Entertainment Universe, which contains all the television shows aired by Marvel before Disney Plus Hotstar took over the streaming rights. Because we see in the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Phil Coulson is brought back to life using free blood. Therefore, hints of multiple deaths were always lurking around in the MCU for common people. Though Phil Coulson was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., he was a common man. Nick Fury, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., used the information of his death to manipulate the Avengers into defeating Loki. It is, however, interesting to note that the first instant of the blipped people coming back to life was not through the arrival of any Avenger, that happened much later at a cinematically appropriate moment, but through a phone call from Laura, Clint Barton's wife. The first person to die at the blip was an Avenger, James Buchanan Barnes or Bucky, and the first Avenger who is shown after the revival among the ones who died was Black Panther.
Where'd he go?
Steve?
Captain Raimi. Captain Sam, can you hear me? On your left.
It is in these acts that death is trivialized in the MCU. Do these multiple deaths for the same person and or alien not compromise the essential humane understanding of death as a universal leveler, something that is sure in the moment of birth? Even if superheroes are taken into consideration, they are not immortal. In Avengers, Loki says that the humans think as immortal, should we test that? And then throws Thor down a hermetical sealed room through 80 floors, but then Thor, leave alone dying, he doesn't even survive, he doesn't even suffer a minor scratch, so as to say. Right. Another important anecdote is that during the first phase of the MCU, especially in the movie Avengers, the death of normal people are not shown directly during the Battle of New York. The reason behind this would be the age group that they were targeting, namely teenagers and young adults. The element of gore and visual representation of death was almost completely missing from MCU until the end of Endgame. It is at this crucial point to realize that even in Endgame and Infinity War, with the exception of Gamora and Natasha Romanoff, almost all the other characters died in a very non-violent way. This way of disappearing into oblivion was shown at the end of Harry Potter Deathly Hallows Part 2. Next. Where Voldemort vanished into thin air following a VFX very similar to that of the play. Such a portrayal of death sits well with the targeted audience for films of the fantasy genre. Even when we witness Natasha or Gamora dying at Vormir in the pursuit of the Soul Stone, there is not much gore involved. They simply fall off a cliff and die. It is only in the fourth phase of the MCU or MCU that the audience is introduced to the Gothic in shows like What If, Loki, and films like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Therefore, it could be argued that with time, just the agent act of death was not enough for the creators, but they needed to introduce the element of gore as well. This situation, however, projects death as a necessary evil in order for the evil to be eradicated. On the battlefield, there were at least 3 heroes who could have died from the snap that Tony Stark died from. A few minutes before Stark's death, we see Hulk had snapped but he didn't die. There was Thor the demigod who didn't have died, and of course Captain Marvel, whose powers were arguably even greater than Thor's. So why did Tony die? Of course, one of the possible reasons could be the expired contract with Robert Downey Jr., but also another reason was the heroic sacrifice, because we see at the beginning of Avengers, Captain America says, Tony, you are not the guy to make the sacrifice play, and then Tony does exactly the same thing, say 7 to 8 years later. Therefore, with the examples discussed above, it could be argued that these multiple deaths unnecessarily complicate the plot line of the MCU or MCU, so that in order to understand a newly launched OTT show, one is expected to watch hundreds of hours of content. This content, compromised by the saturation point that the MCU has reached with Endgame, only leaves one door open, that of bringing in the death of the same character in multiple ways. The most blatant example of this occurs in the show Loki, where in the presence of many variants of Loki, one of them, classic Loki, dies, but the 2 other Lokis, male and female Loki, continue their pursuit of Kang. This opens up an array of questions for posterity to ponder upon, namely, which characters could be considered eligible for multiple deaths, given that the MCU has already killed off every possible type of person, alien and other miscellaneous beings in the blip, only to bring them back to life a film later. Subsequently, what could be the fate of new characters like Moon Knight, She-Hulk, Miss Marvel, the Eternals and so on, with reference to their deaths? In a recent announcement at the San Diego Comic Con, Kevin Feige, the current president of the MCU, announced an array of films and shows that Marvel plans to release in the next couple of years. With this bulk of content planned, it can be guessed that they would count on this motif of repeated deaths and reappearances of superheroes in order to retain their audience. Thus, defying Jivanananda, their heroes would eventually attain the status of being immortal, elevating them from being heroes to being deities. One has to wonder in the end, would that be really beneficial or progressive for a universe like Marvel that has spent decades trying to humanize its heroes and attempting to get the layman to identify with them? Only time will tell. Thank you.